Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. The haunting death mask of the first Tudor king. The Tudor period is considered the most famous in English history, as it was a brutal time where there was a huge number of executions. Henry VIII, throughout his almost 4-decade-long reign, would execute some of his closest friends and advisors, such as Cromwell, and also 2 of his wives would end up at the executioner's block in the Tower of London. But the first Tudor king was his father, Henry VII, who defeated Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field, and Henry's victory would end the Wars of the Roses. He was considered a shrewd and careful monarch, and one who did not necessarily show emotion, but following the death of his wife, Elizabeth of York, Henry VII's world changed. He died on the 21st of April 1509 at the age of 52, having an almost 24-year-long reign on the throne of England, bringing stability back to the monarchy. But after his death, a death mask was cast of his face, and it has inspired other effigies of the first Tudor king, and recently technology has been used to bring Henry's face back to life. But what is the story of Henry VII's death mask? As mentioned, on the 21st of April 1509, Henry VII died, and he had been ill since the spring of 1507, and he suffered from a nasty throat infection. It was said that the king for some time had suffered with acute rheumatic fever, and that he experienced bouts of depression and a loss of appetite. It was thought at the start of 1509 that he was suffering from tuberculosis, and on the day before he died, his confessor was summoned to administer the last rites. He was tended to by other members of his household, and the final days of Henry VII were documented by John Fisher, the future executed Bishop of Rochester. It was said that the king died a good Christian death, and that his last days were not peaceful, and that they were filled with confession, prayer, and the emotion of Henry VII's life came out. He was weeping constantly, and he received the sacrament of penance, with a marvellous compassion and flow of tears, that at some time he wept and sobbed by the space of 3/4 of an hour. Henry VII had then prepared himself for death. It was said that same day of his departure he heard Mass of the glorious Virgin, the Mother of Christ, to whom always in his life he had a singular and special devotion. The image of the crucifix many a time a day, full devoutly, he did behold his with great reverence, lifting up his head as he might, holding up his hands before it, and often embracing it in his arms with great devotion, kissing it, and beating often his breast. Who may think that in this manner was not perfect faith, for may suppose that this manner of delaying he faithfully believed not that the ear of the Almighty God was open unto him, and ready to hear him cry for mercy. Henry VII was in agony, not for the dread of death only, but for the dread of the judgment of Almighty God, and he was worried and stressed about what would happen to his soul after his death. He was praying heavily for mercy, but then in his final moments came. He succumbed to tuberculosis, which was a very nasty death, and he left the throne to his eldest alive son, Henry VIII. Now Henry VIII's reign would change history forever, but following his death, Henry VII's body remained at Richmond Palace for some time until the funeral arrangements were finalised. He was then embalmed, and at some point a death mask would be cast of the first Tudor king. A death mask was a wax or plaster cast of someone important's face after their death, and it was done as a moment of the dead. The death mask of the first Tudor king was cast before he was taken to his funeral, and most likely during the embalming process, but it had a very important purpose, as today, using it, we can see what Henry VII looked like, and what his appearance was like in his final years. His death mask was used to create his funeral effigy, and this shows a man sitting upright with short cropped black hair, and with his eyes wide open and mouth pursed closed. It shows the king having asymmetrical features, and shows him looking rather stern. It's believed that the effigy was made from the death mask, and that this effigy sat on top of the coffin when it was taken into Westminster Abbey, where he was then interred inside the ornate and huge lady chapel that he had commissioned. to be a place of royal burials. The death mask was made to form part of the funeral effigy, and it sat on top of Henry's casket. Thousands inside of London would have seen their king's final form in this wooden image that sat on top of the horse-drawn hearse. It showed many people in London their king for the first time, as during the Tudor times it wasn't common for the people to even know what the monarch looked like, and many wouldn't have been able to recognise him if they saw him, as it wasn't common for people to even see portraits of the king. But the lifelike effigy would have shown the people who was inside the coffin, and it would have been dressed in Henry's robes and showed him true to life. Henry in the effigy also looks rather ill and gaunt, in opposition to the variety of paintings that were created of him, showing his longer flowing hair and bright-coloured countenance. Another image would be made of Henry VII after his death, and this was a bust made by Torregiano, and it shows the king clad in fair-lined gown and a black Tudor-style hat. He looks as if he is contemplating something, but he is certainly looking more healthy, and it's believed that when this was made, the bust used the death mask and the effigy to create the sculpture. Using this death mask, he then tried to make the king more lifelike and alive, and show him in his younger and more glorious years. It's believed that this bust was also a plan or a starter on the bronze tomb effigy which would be placed on his resting place in Westminster Abbey. Henry VII as a king was known for being a man who, after the Wars of the Roses, managed to bring the country under control. His marriage to Elizabeth of York united the country following the turbulence of the previous civil war, and he would deal with many disputes in a serious manner. He used justices of the peace to keep order for him, but his final years were marred by worry, tragedy and upset. Henry VII's life was rocked by the death of his heir and eldest son Arthur, but also then the loss of his wife Elizabeth of York. These tragedies greatly upset the man who was considered emotionless and staunch, and after Elizabeth's death his health suffered and he would succumb to a nasty bout of tuberculosis. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.